G'day and welcome to another live hangout here at Voice Essentials, the fourth last live hangout of 2023. I know, this is wild, right? We are, the festive season is, well, does the festive season start with Halloween? I guess there's that debate to be had. I guess we don't celebrate Thanksgiving in Australia, but is Thanksgiving still about, is it yet to happen in the Northern Hemisphere? If you're in the Northern Hemisphere, I can see Mackenzie Kate is giving us quite an insight into her goings on in the live chat right now. Mackenzie, you might like to let us know what date is Thanksgiving in the US, because we down here south of the equator, we don't celebrate Thanksgiving. Or has it already gone? Has it already been? I don't I don't know. Now that I'm saying all this, I seem to remember us actually talking about it a few shows ago. So maybe it has already been. I usually if something important, like an important date is happening somewhere in the world, the wonderful Linda lets me know in our emails. There was no mention of Thanksgiving this week, so I'm not sure. Oh, okay, November. Well, there you go. Linda's dived in. November 23rd. So it hasn't happened yet. There you go. Maybe it was the Canadian Thanksgiving. Maybe the Canadian Thanksgiving happens earlier. I don't know. Today we are doing a mini topic. We'll get to the mini topic in a moment, it's an important topic. It's something that we've talked about before here on the channel, but it's an important topic for us to talk about again as we come in the lead up to the new year, and that'll make sense once I reveal what the mini topic is today. We'll get to that in a moment. Next week, I just want to let you know what's happening over the next the next 3 shows after today. So with the mini topic today, we'll also do a Q&A. If you have questions concerning today's mini topic, or broader questions regarding voice and learning to sing, then throw them into the live chat. Linda will take them down. She records them, and I can see them off to my left. Is that your right? And I can see them in a Word doc and a Google doc, and I can we'll answer those questions later in the show. What we're doing next week is we've got Professor Brian Gill coming on, and the topic that Brian has nominated that we're going to talk about is it's a little bit of a prickly pear, this one. We're going to be talking about the myth of student-centered learning. Controversial. But we are going to get into that next week, and I think it's going to be really interesting discussion. I'm all for teachers, me for example, not lording it over their students as if they're a lesser being. I'm very much for that. However, it is important, and we're going to unpack this next week, it is important that the student approach their lesson with a sense of teachability, that the teacher might just know a few things more about said subject, in this case singing, than the student does. It's not to say the teacher knows everything, absolutely not. But there seems to, every now and then I come into contact with students who, let's just say that balance is a little bit out of whack. And anyway, we're going to unpack that next week. I think it's going to be a fascinating conversation. And if you've been watching the show for any length of time, like Melvin, or like I'm looking at the chat, which if I was to look this way, I can't see what the chat says, even though I'd be looking at the chat. So I've got to look over this way. I can see Melvin, I can see Mr. Fomiati, Mackenzie Kate, of course, Linda. You're all been around for long enough to remember that Professor Brian Gill comes onto the show around about this time, the second last show of every year. And he's a great guy. He is so knowledgeable, and it's going to be so interesting to unpack that topic with him. So make sure you put that in your diary. The week after that, which is the 20th of November here in Brisbane, Australia, at 1 p.m. As you know, we do this at the same time every Monday. At 1 p.m. we'll do our final Q&A. Well, it'll be our final official Q&A for the year. And that's going to happen on the 20th. And then our final show, last year we did this for the first time, and we kind of made it a big surprise. And I'm not making it a big surprise this year. The last show of the year, Linda is going to join me on the show. We're going to talk about the year that was. We'll probably still answer some questions, but it's more a bit of a look back, a walk through the ups and downs of the year. And, you know, every year has a bit of a landscape of the goods, the bads, and the uglies. And our year has been pretty good for the most part, hasn't it? We've had a few technical glitches along the way, and I don't think that'll ever not be a thing. In fact, I'll be honest and tell you, I'm currently, you know, I feel like the guillotine's hanging over my head right now with the technical stuff with the show, because after last week's show, and I do this every week, after the show, I go straight into an online session with a student, and she is in Sydney. And we were 5 minutes into the lesson, and suddenly the software that I use to do these shows, and I also use to do my online lessons, just stopped, just actually closed down. Really weird. I'm fairly confident that it was a bit of just a one-off glitch, because it hasn't happened again. But you know, I mean, these technical things. So if suddenly our show just freezes and stops, you'll know why. It always makes me a bit nervous. The tech. Oh, dear me. I've said it before. I'll say it again. There is a reason why more, you know, really great singing teachers are not doing this. It's because the entrance into the tech side of things to pull this off, it's not low. It's not a low entrance point, and also the stress that goes with it. Oh, dearie me. Okay, so that'll be our last show. Now, then we take, as you know, we take all of December and January off. It's a big break. We come back, our first show is the 5th of February. For many of you, that's the 4th of February, because many of you are behind in time. So we'll be back in February, definitely coming back. You know, what we probably should do, Linda, is count how many shows we've done up until the end of this year. It's in the hundreds. I've been doing these live shows for a long time, and we're going to continue into 2024, which is great. But over the break, I just want to let you know, I have been working really hard to get a whole heap of videos, so that pretty much for the length of the 2 months that we're not hanging out together live, that there are still 3 pre-recorded videos going live every week for you. 2 of which will be a vocal analysis video. So I've got some crackers coming up over the December, January. Some new singers that we haven't reviewed anymore, and oh my goodness, wow, just fabulous voices. So that's going to be happening, as well as the midweek pre-record educational instructional video, and that will be also happening. So there's going to be plenty of content coming your way over that period of time. I do all of that so that I can have a holiday. I actually take 4 weeks break over the festive season. I go away with my family. We go camping, you know, get dirt between the toes, shower infrequently. I do love a good camp at the end of every year. So we get away, we just reset. And it's also, do you know what? Our good friend Linda, she needs a break as well. She does just as much, if not more, work on this show than I do. So she needs a break as well. So we take the 2 months off, but we will be back in the new year, and dare I say, bigger and better than ever. I really hope we were a little bit light on for special guests this year. That was all, and I think I've shared this with you, that was so circumstantial. I just had a number of people had for very, very important reasons, had to postpone, not cancel. They just said, look, I've had something come up, I can't. And that happened 3 or 4 times. And so it's just meant that we'll get to see those people next year. And I've got some ideas for bringing back some oldies, but some goodies as far as people that we interviewed years ago that we haven't spoken to for a while. And hopefully we'll get to introduce ourselves to some new people as well. So lots coming up. It's going to be an exciting year. And that probably gives me good reason to jump over. Now, I'm hitting buttons. Hang on a second. Let's make sure I get all this right. I'm going to come over here. Oh, where are you, Daniel? There we go. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that because that brings us to our mini topic. And it's about this time of year that people start to think about what is their learning to sing journey going to look like in the new year. And it's interesting, you'd be well excused for thinking that it's not until January that I start to get all of my calls for new students for a new year. It's actually about now. In fact, I've spoken to 2 people this morning. People start to think about what is their new year, 2024 in this case, going to look like on a whole range of fronts, not just learning to sing, but certainly with learning to sing, people start to think about a new teacher or just simply finding a teacher. So I thought it would be really we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, so make sure if you've got questions as we go along, ask them. And if you've got unrelated questions to the topic at hand, make sure you ask them. And put them into the chat. For those of you who are watching and have never joined us before, you do need to subscribe to the channel to be able to ask your question, which is not a small. It's a small thing to ask, I think, for people to become a part of the community, to participate in the community. So let's dive in here. Choosing the right singing teacher, it can be the make or break of your successful progression as a young learning singer. I say this all the time, and I wholeheartedly believe it. Every singing teacher has something to give you, has something to teach you. Some singing teachers have more to offer than others, but every singing teacher has something to give you. And it's interesting so I'll use myself as an example. Just because with one teacher, with one student, I'm able to give them years of tuition, and I've actually, a big chunk of my students have been with me for many, many years. But then I get students who are with me for a term, and they get to the end of that term and they go, hey, thanks very much. I've really enjoyed my time with you, and we part ways friends, and which is important. We might talk about that a bit more as we go along with today's topic. And so it's important that it's not that every teacher, that ones like myself will only ever be able to offer more. Sometimes I'm the teacher offering less to a student than, say, one of my colleagues. So that's really important as we go along here and we talk about this topic. The first thing I want you to think about is if you're in the game of wanting to learn to sing and you are thinking that you need a singing teacher, and incidentally, private one-on-one lessons is the gold standard of learning to sing. There are other ways of doing it. That is why I have online courses, because not everyone can either afford the money or access the right teacher, afford the time. There's a whole range of reasons why a student might not be able to engage in private tuition. And so certainly don't think that I'm about saying learning to sing should only be, via one-on-one tuition. It can't. Well, why would I have online courses if that were the case? But certainly it remains the gold standard for really, developing some momentum, because the one thing that my online courses cannot do for you is provide you with feedback. We try to cater to that through the Facebook group, and your peers and myself on occasion will provide feedback to you in your learning as you go along in the online courses. But there really isn't anything quite like in the moment, doing the lesson, having the teacher, not diagnose, that's more for medical side, but you know what I mean, identifying sound, identifying where things might need to be refined and developed and those sorts of things. So it's definitely something that you want to be thinking about in regards to your personalized tuition. When you are looking for the teacher, these days, and this was not necessarily the case if we were to go back 30, 40 years, these days there isn't a lot of reason for a teacher to not have had done some level of formal training, whether that be them doing an online course in learning to teach singing, or whether they've done a formal pedagogy course through a university or a college. There is, and in the time that I'll have been teaching 29 years next year. So I'm just approaching the end of my 28th year of teaching. In that period of time, the amount of information that a teacher really needs to grapple with and get their head around is quite significant compared to when I started. When I started, there were one, two, maybe three books. I mean, the book that everyone used was Richard Miller's Structure of Singing. But now there are so many textbooks focusing in on really specific different areas of the voice. And so you want to make sure your teacher is kind of around that. Again, your teacher does not need to know everything, but they do need to know where to find the information that you may need to assist your particular learning. And so be mindful of that. You also want a teacher who has kind of done it. In the world of singing, it's funny, online, quite a bit online, on YouTube, I'm often asked, yeah, but can you actually, especially on the analysis videos or in some of my instructional videos where there's not a lot of singing, it's more the academic part of singing, the theoretical aspects of singing. People go, yeah, you kind of know all the information, but can you actually sing? Often what I want to respond with is, yes, can you read? Because I always, in every video, there's a link to a playlist of me singing. In every description of every video, there's a link in this video to a playlist of me singing. I don't respond like that. I must admit, sometimes I want to, because sometimes people are a bit rude. But anywho, the point being is, you really do want your singing teacher to be able to kind of sing. If I was wanting to learn to dance, which I don't have any desire to do, but if I wanted to, I'd kind of want my teacher to be able to dance. Firstly, I'd want them to be able to show me how to do what I'm going to learn to do. So it's the same thing with singing, but not only can they sing some scales, can they sing a song? What sort of performance experience have they had? These are really important questions. I must say, as we go along, no one single point that we're going to be talking about here is an absolute deal breaker. I actually know a couple of very, very, very good singing teachers who have had what would have to be honest and say quite limited performance experience. Not to say they haven't done any, but their performance experience, and in fact I'm thinking of their professional performance experience, is virtually nil. And yet they are exceptional teachers. So, there are always exceptions to the rule. And again, no single thing that we're going to talk about today as we go along is an absolute deal breaker, including this one, your teaching style. Well, not yours as a student, but mine as a teacher. Not every teacher is going to lockstep with every student. I think the more experienced you become as a teacher, and I think this has been my development, my experience as a teacher, the older I get, the more experienced I get, the more I am able to meet a student at where they are at. And therefore, my teaching style is able to really connect with a student's own needs, whether it be learning preferences, whether it be repertoire requirements, just whether it be personality. One of the really wonderful things about my job is I get to meet such a variety of people from all different walks of life, from all the different stratas of the social ladder economically, and that's a real joy. I love that. And so I need to be able to meet a person as they come through the door and meet them for where they're at. And I'd encourage you to find a teacher who you feel that you can really connect with and really, lockstep with. The other thing too that they need to be able to do is the teacher needs to be adaptable to your skill level. There's no sense in them throwing a whole heap of exercises at you that you're really not ready for, and it's not an uncommon story for a new student to tell me, I had a couple of lessons with unnamed teacher, and I don't know, I felt like I was trying to get over a high jump that I just couldn't get myself up and over, and that's quite discouraging for the beginner. So your teacher needs to be able to meet you where you're at in your skill level, as well as your personality and those sorts of things. You want to know what does your teacher specialize in? We talk a lot here on the channel, we reference it a lot, and that is the difference between classical discipline and contemporary discipline. Me, in point, I am a contemporary singing teacher only. I do not teach any classical. That is despite the fact that I did 2 years of, classical voice at the Queensland Conservatorium of Music under excellent classical teachers. And I was a founding member of the 10 Tenors, and at the time we were quite a classical group. And so I've even got professional performance experience as a classical singer. But that's not my bag when it comes to singing. And I've really honed my craft as a teacher specifically around contemporary vocal. Now that does take into account quite a bit of the music theatre space, not all of it, but quite a bit, given the way modern music theatre has gone. But I kind of stopped short of the really, really heavy, distorted, disturbed vocal techniques I usually refer on for those students I do a little bit of that work, but it's really important that you understand what does your teacher specialize. You can ask this when you make an inquiry. If your teacher that you're talking to, you're interviewing, can't really identify exactly where they specialize, that might be a red flag. It might be an opportunity for you to maybe ask further questions. But you really do want your teacher to know what are their strengths. Now, equally, if your teacher is a brand new teacher, they might not yet know where they're going to eventually in their career as a teacher specialize, and so that's okay as well. We all, every teacher, me included, we all have to start somewhere, and it does take a little bit of time for your teacher to know where are they going to specialize. But ask that and ask them about and so what is their approach technically with the voice. There are a number of methodologies in the world of voice teaching, and you might like to ask after, is there a particular method that you teach? And when I'm asked that question, I'm able to respond by saying, well, actually, I'm quite an eclectic teacher, methodology-wise, and so I draw on quite a number of really positive attributes of a range of different models that I then teach through my own Voice Essentials program. So it's just important for you to be able to recognize and know, well, where are you going? I'm just going to come back here and check that we're still live and everything, because I think we're still good, because I had a phone call coming through just then, and hopefully it wasn't Linda. I don't think it was Linda. No, it looks like everything's... Linda, throw a comment into... because I can't see our Word document at the moment. So throw a comment into the chat to let me know that we're good to go. We're good to keep going. Okay, over here. When you've been teaching as long as I have, it's likely that your teacher will have gathered some success stories. Students that have... Yes, you are live, no interruption. I've just seen... Thank you, Linda. Given you just never know with this YouTube thing, right? It is likely for a teacher who has been teaching for as long as I have, that they will have a range of students who they have taught over the years, who have gone on to be relatively successful in their space. In my case, I can point to a lot of worship leaders. I can point to a lot of recorded artists. I can point to a lot of mostly amateur theatre singers, younger people who are intent on going in competitions and talent shows. And so you do want to ask people, your prospective teacher, who have you taught? Again, this is not a deal breaker. They do not have to have taught Grammy award-winning vocalists. They don't. But you do kind of want to know that their students are doing well. And so ask after that. Ask after how their student body is going along. And it may well be that on their website or through Google, you're able to read a whole range of reviews, hopefully authentic and genuine reviews about what the students themselves have to say about that teacher. I think that's important as well. One thing you're going to pick up pretty quickly, I think, in a phone conversation is how well does a teacher communicate? This is going to be really important. Clarity of communication is key to your learning, because, well, there's an old saying, if you confuse, you lose. And if your teacher, the way they're kind of delivering the information to you kind of leaving you all in twists and turns and not knowing up from down, then either, maybe at times they can just be asked to, hey, could you maybe go over that again? I didn't quite catch it. Or maybe that's their style of communication, or the craft of communication is not as well honed as you need it to be at that point in time. And so really talk to them about that. You also want to make sure that their communication is constructive. A teacher, we are here, it's my personal belief that teachers are here to encourage. We are here to be constructive in our feedback. We are here to be honest, but you can be honest without being hurtful. And unfortunately, on occasion, I still get reports of teachers who their words have really cut deep. It's possibly happened with me too, and that's a horrible thing to think that might have been the case. But no one's perfect. But we're always looking for an opportunity to be, or certainly I'm always looking for an opportunity to be encouraging in my feedback. Honest, but encouraging. People are paying me to be honest. There's no sense in me completely gilding the lily and telling everyone, oh, yeah, you're amazing, when it's quite plain the room for improvement is significant. But certainly that, when we identify that need for improvement, every teacher can do that in a really positive and constructive way. So make sure you do. Make sure you find a teacher who can do that for you. Going on to the next one, and then I think we kind of have already touched on this, but let's just draw it out. You're not going to connect with every human being on the planet. It's just a fact of life, isn't it? There are some personalities that you feel like you just connect and resonate with, and it's just awesome, and you're like long lost friends. Where have you been all of my life? Alternatively, there are those people who, they're not bad people. You're not a bad person, but for whatever reason, you clash. Like it's like, oh, yeah, two heads being rammed together, and no matter how civil you might be, just something just grates both of you. That happens. And a good teacher is going to be able to try to grease the wheels a bit of that, so that is not, going to be a deal breaker. But over the years with my studio, there have been times when it's just not working. And I think the student knows it, I know it. And so I'm always keen in those circumstances for the chapter, the journey that we've taken together, albeit often in these situations very short, that we part friends, that we part in an amicable manner, in a mature manner. Because just because you kind of didn't get on doesn't mean you've got to be horrible to each other. It doesn't mean you've got to blame each other. It just means that things might just need to be not you and them together. So be aware of that. I think that's the rarity. This is the exception to the rule. This very rarely happens, and in fact, probably over the last decade, I can count on one hand. I teach, in that period of time, I've taught probably thousands of singers, and I could count on one hand in the last decade that has happened. So just but be aware, it can happen, and that's okay. There are going to be times where you just go, you know what, you and I, we're not compatible. God bless you. Have a good life, and you move on. Of course, the practicality of the location of the teacher is going to be important. Is the teacher local to you? Don't underestimate the impact of psychological barriers to your learning. I have a number of students who travel quite the distance to get to me. They'll often be traveling, you know, an hour and a half. Some of them are traveling a little bit further, 2 hours, to come to their lesson every fortnight. When a student is traveling that kind of distance, now this has changed a bit since the end of COVID, because we now have online lessons, don't we? And certainly I teach a lot of my students online. I teach Linda online because Linda's in Hobart, so there's no amount of traveling to get up here. But when a student is having to travel quite a distance, I generally encourage them to go to fortnightly sessions. And the reason being is to travel that distance every week, and the student themselves needs to be able to make this decision. This is not something that I dictate or prescribe, but it's something that I talk about with the student. To make that journey every week, it's a psychological barrier. And what happens is when we have those psychological barriers in play, they erode our momentum. They dilute our passion, because we think, oh, gotta make that trip again. I love my lessons, but man, case in point, I was at my PT session this morning, my personal trainer. My PT sessions happen every Monday morning at 5:45 every Monday morning. I can tell you, it is a psychological barrier to getting there, to be doing it at that hour every week. It's a psychological barrier. I manage to do it. I do, and in part because if I don't, I've just wasted some money, because he has a 24-hour cancellation rule just like I do. So I've got to get up and I've got to go and do it. But I've got to overcome that barrier every morning. That's what I'm talking about here. You want to make sure that however you're doing this, that you remove as many of those psychological barriers to your learning as possible. So one of those is going to be location. One of them can be accessibility. And so, you know, if learning online is going to work better for you consistently over an extended period of time, then learn online. You'll need to find yourself a teacher who has a really good online process, but there's plenty of those around now, including me, and you can certainly do that. So just be mindful of those sorts of things as you're thinking about, you know, your teacher for the new year. Finally, you do want to be able to have the opportunity to have a consultation and assessment session with the teacher. Not all teachers, again, this is not a deal breaker, because not all teachers allow for that. In my case, I do have a first consultation session. It is a session you pay for. I've never been a person to do a free, you know, first lesson, but my students for their first consultation do pay for the session. I actually think that's important. But then the student isn't committed until in the middle of that lesson they say, yeah, let's do this. Let's book in for either weekly or fortnightly sessions, and we go from there. During that consultation, you want to have an opportunity. Now, in my case, what we do is we do a 2-page analysis of the student's voice if they're in studio. And we look at data points like highest note, lowest note, breath prolongation. We do a spectrogram of the voice, so I get to see, you know, what is the overall resonance quality of the sound that they're producing. There's a number of things that we look at. Online, what I'll generally get to do, because I can't do that consultation with students online, but what I can do is I usually get the student to have a sing for me. They'll sing a song or two that we've asked them to pre-prepare, and we'll get them to sing, and I'm able to then make some, qualitative assessment of what I'm hearing as they sing. You want your teacher to be able to hear you, so just so that they can give you some feedback in the moment. That's also an opportunity for you to assess, oh, yeah, that feedback's really quite good, or, oh, I kind of already knew all of that feedback. And so there's it's almost a bit of an interview for both of you, isn't it? Where you're assessing the teacher's assessing you, you're checking out the compatibility. Are your personalities going to, link up? It's a whole range of things that you get to do in that first consultation that are really important. And the other thing too is, particularly, and this is more important for when you are doing in-person lessons, not online, but in person, is the space that you're going to. Do you feel safe and comfortable in that environment? Or is it weird and they're teaching you in their bedroom? Like, if that's happening, that probably is the deal breaker, the red flag. Do not do lessons in anyone's bedroom. So these things happen, okay? So make sure that you're able to assess it. Also, it can be really wise, and this is just a final comment, talking about that first lesson. If you're going to someone's house, and in my case, people come to my home, to a dedicated teaching studio. If you're a young woman, and you think, and you're going to perhaps a lesson with a male, it can be really wise for the first lesson to attend with a friend. The friend needn't even come in. They might just sit in the car and wait for you. It's just a general safety thing that I think is really wise to adhere to, just to make sure everything's above board and, there's no silliness going on. I must admit, I haven't to this, and I've been doing this a little while, I've never heard of anything, weird happening around the delivery of singing lessons, but I wouldn't want you to be the first for that to happen to. So there you go. I hope that's a whole range of things that we've just talked about there that we can talk to in regards to choosing a good singing teacher as you approach the new year. Again, private one-on-one lessons, they're the gold standard. They are. And you are going to get so much value. The reason why your one-on-one lessons are more expensive than, for example, doing an online course is because you get so much more out of a one-on-one session where the teacher can direct specific feedback to you in regards to your specific voice. Online courses are, importantly, designed to be a little bit more generic, a little bit more wide scope, to sort of catch more scenarios with more voices generically. Whereas if you're looking for a singing teacher, you're looking for someone that's going to be able to really work directly, specifically with you, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing to do. I highly recommend it. That'll come as no surprise, will it? I highly recommend you find yourself a quality, experienced singing teacher using the list of things that we've just gone over. You won't regret it. Good quality singing lessons can transform your voice. And I've seen it time and time again with students, and I encourage you to give that some thought as we approach a new year, and hopefully that equips you with all the right information that you are going to need to as we get to the new year. Let's come over here. We've got some questions. Woohoo! Linda. I'm going to give Linda the first question again. Do many of your students take the singing exams route? Dr. Dan, what is the process you take them through? How does that differ from your online courses? Do you know, I don't teach students for exams. I stopped teaching students for exams probably in the first 5 years or so of my teaching. It's not because they're necessarily a bad thing, but because, and this is where we get to talk a bit more about my specific approach and the type of student that I generally attract, is they're not students, and I'm not the teacher who's looking to have the piece of paper to say, oh, I can sing. Most of my students, because I teach a lot of pro students, even a lot of my amateur students, they're singing in scenarios where you either can or you can't. It doesn't matter what mark you got in an exam. So if you're singing in your church worship team, it doesn't matter if you rock up with a paper that says 73 out of 100. It's, can you stand up and actually sing on stage and do that in a relatively successful manner? That's what I prepare my students for, is the very practical end. Now, you will find a lot of teachers. Here in Australia, we have a system called the AMEB, the Australian Musical Examination Board, I think is what it stands for. And they have a whole range of examinations for music, piano, guitar, singing, classical, singing for popular music, singing for leisure. There's a whole range of courses that you can do. They're all good things. I'm certainly not saying they're not good things to do. And if that's what you want to do, then I can tell you I'm not the teacher for you. I don't do that. There are a lot of teachers that do. And if that's what you want to do, if you want to grab that piece of paper, then you go for it and find a teacher that will work on that with you. More often than not, and I'm actually, I'll say this, but I'll say it, with a big, wide open caveat. More often than not, a lot of the teachers that do that kind of work are predominantly working with primary school, high school students, up into their teenage years, where mum and dad are pretty keen for that piece of paper. And sometimes, depending on the level of that piece of paper, it can actually help with things like tertiary entrance and getting into the right university and preparing them well for that. So that must all be said. But I mostly teach, in fact, I only teach adults. And so I just don't do it and haven't done that for a little while. Melvin's got a question. I hope, Linda, that answers your question. It differs. The question that do you know what I haven't done? I've got so carried away here that I didn't put the question. Oh, here we go. I didn't put the question up there. I should have put your question up there, Linda. How does that differ from my online course? Well, the online courses, you do get a certificate at the end of those, but they're a certificate of completion. And it's basically just to celebrate the fact that you did the full online course, and that's cool. And we give you something that you can put up in your room, or, I don't know, put it on your mirror in the bathroom. You can look at that and go, yeah, I achieved that. They're not a qualification as such. But that is probably how they differ. Whereas the AMEB system, it's actually a certified course that is recognised by a lot of institutions, certainly here in Australia, and that's something that you can account for. Melvin has got a question. Let's throw Melvin's questions up. So Melvin, lately I've been trying to develop my ability to sing higher notes in my chest voice. Normally I tend to switch to head voice instinctively when I get higher in my range. Any suggestions? The movement from lower register to upper register for most men is going to instinctively happen around about, there's a bit of a range. It's around about E flat 4 to about 4, to around about, F4 is what I was searching for that. E flat 4 to about F4. And, but you can you can actually sing your upper register balance all the way much further down than E flat 4. Equally, you can withhold the transition and sing with a short and a dominant lower register sound beyond the F4, well up into, even for baritones, up to G4, A flat 4. We have to, it's so important that you've got your technique in place when you're learning to do this, because you are, when you're doing that, you are stretching ligament within the vocal folds. There is a whole range of, you know, muscular and to air balance that you want to have in place technically, some foundational things that you want to have in check. So just be attentive to that and be mindful that you don't want to be, you know, just throwing caution to the wind and just screaming your head off. And so I would suggest that you might like to try some semi-occluded vocal tract activities, some lip bubbles, some tongue trills, even some straw phonation, doing some sirens, using exercise 19 on voice. So it's actually exercise 1 on Voice Essentials 2, but in the scheme of Voice Essentials, it's exercise 19. They're vocal sirens, where you get to really workshop that vocal range through a siren, and you can play with the weight of that musculature and be mindful of where you are on a keyboard as you're doing that. And they can be, hopefully that will help you out, Melvin, and you'll get some good things like that. And I've just seen Linda's comment about Amy B is like Trinity in the UK, and that is absolutely the case. That's exactly what it is like. It's exactly like Trinity, the same, kind of the same thing. I just looked down and I saw the time and went, oh, wow, where did that go? I literally, I got a bit of a shock when I saw that it was, 10 to 2. We have to finish for today. I hope you've enjoyed today's live hangout, and I hope we've been able to equip you with some really good information in the lead up to the new year if you're thinking about grabbing yourself some lessons. I'll put it out there. If you are keen to get private lessons and you're thinking, hey, I'd like to get some lessons with Dr. Dan, I'd love to, at least do our first consultation with you, and let's see if we're compatible. Let's see if we can get some really exciting stuff happening with your voice. But again, I'm not the only qualified singing teacher out there, and it might even be that if you're in a different part of the world, it might even be that the even better part of doing lessons is to be in the room with the person, a real human being right in front of you, and that can be really positive. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed today's live hangout. I'm so glad that we didn't have any tech issues. Don't speak too soon, Daniel. Okay, have a great week, everyone. Next week, we've got Professor Brian Gill. It's going to be awesome. Put it in your diary. It is going to be hot to trot, so make sure you do that. I do hope you have a great week. I look forward to seeing you all again when you'll hear me say, I'm Dr. Dan. Sing well.